Today I'd like to talk about Buddhism and kind of wrap up our India units. We learned about the Hindus the last couple days and their religion and the caste system. Well, a lot of the Hindus started to realize that this was a very unfair system, especially for the Hindus in the lower class. So they wanted something simpler and they wanted something more spiritual, and so they decided to go to Buddhism, which we know was founded by Siddhartha Gautama. And we're going to talk a little bit about who he was and how he became the Buddha. And so his story is a pretty neat little legend. On the next slide, I actually have a video that I'd like you to watch. But he was a prince. He was born around 563 BC in a small kingdom near the Himalayas, which would be where Nepal is today. Siddhartha was born into wealth. He had everything. His dad had found out that he was possibly going to either be a king or a monk, and so he wanted him to be a king like himself and decided to keep him away from suffering and pain and old people and sickness, anything that could make him want to go and help people and turn into a monk. And so one day he actually traveled out and saw someone who was ill, and he just couldn't understand what was going on. And so he thought there had to be more to life, and he went out, left his beautiful wife, his child, and he decided he wanted to seek the answers to why do people suffer and how could their suffering be cured. So at first he lived like a hermit, fasting and sleeping on the hard ground. He almost starved to death and realized, well, you can't get a lot accomplished if you die. So he decided to meditate for a very long time. And the legend says that after 49 days, he finally understood. He saw a great light. And he spent the rest of his life wandering around the countryside and telling people about what he had discovered about life and the nature of suffering. So that religion kind of became known as Buddhism, and his followers actually started calling him Buddha, which meant the enlightened one. So what I'd like you to do is watch this quick video. So if you'll just pause this video and push play on the video about Siddhartha and his life and how he became to be known as Buddha. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that video. Give you a little more background on Buddha. Siddhartha, at first when he was a prince, he didn't understand what real life was like. He didn't understand pain or suffering or sickness or poverty because he wasn't around that. And so he believed the only way to find out what the real world was like was to give up everything. So he gave up his desires for fame, money, any worldly things, and he believed if you gave up all those things that you would then gain or reach nirvana, which is not the band. Okay, nirvana is not a place but a state of wisdom, and it actually came from the Sanskrit word meaning blowing out a candle. If you would take just a second and watch this very, very short video on nirvana, it kind of explains what it is. So at the heart of Buddha's teachings, he came up with these Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths are as listed: life is full of suffering. People suffer because they desire worldly things and self-satisfaction. And the way to end suffering is to stop desiring things. The only way to stop desiring things is to follow the Eightfold Path, which is actually going to be on the next slide. But take a second and watch this video about the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. So we know Buddha's fourth truth says to follow the Eightfold Path. So if you do these 8 steps, you'll eliminate suffering and become enlightened. And so as you can see, the Eightfold Path, the first one is, of course, knowing and understanding the Four Noble Truths. Give up worldly things and don't harm others. Tell the truth, don't gossip, and don't speak badly of others. Don't commit evil acts like killing, stealing, or living an unclean life. Do rewarding work. Work for good and oppose evil. Make sure your mind keeps your senses under control. And practice meditation as a way of understanding reality. One reason the Buddha's ideas became popular was that he did not accept the Varna or Jati systems that we talked about in Hinduism, and a person's place in life really depended on the person and what they did or what they thought. Buddha did believe in reincarnation, but it was kind of different. If people wanted to stop being reborn into new lives, the Buddha said they would only have to follow his Eightfold Path. So if they did that, then they could reach the enlightenment. So this was very appealing for, like I said again, many of the Hindus, especially in the lower class, because they could actually go on and move on and reach that enlightenment that they would have never reached before in the Hinduism practice. So Buddhism is split up into 2 main groups. Buddha preached for over 40 years his ideas. His disciples followed him around. And after his death, they spread his message all over Asia. So as more and more people practiced Buddhism, disagreements arose, of course, about Buddha's ideas. So that's when Buddhism actually split up into 2 groups. So the first group was Theravada. And Theravada means the teaching of elders, and it sees the Buddha as a great teacher, but not a god. Buddhist teachers and merchants spread the ideas of Theravada to the south and east, and it can even be seen in places like Sri Lanka and Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. The second group that Buddhism is split up into, and excuse my pronunciation, but Mahayana Buddhism is the second kind, and it teaches that Buddha is a god who came to save his people. Mahayana Buddhists believe that following the Eightfold Path is too hard for most people in this world, and they believe that by worshiping the Buddha instead, people will go to heaven after they die. So there they can follow the Eightfold Path and reach nirvana. So they don't even follow the Eightfold Path until after they die. Mahayana Buddhists also have special affection for Bodhisattvas. Sorry about my pronunciation. Those are enlightened people who have postponed going to heaven instead. They've decided to stay on earth to help others and do good deeds. Special Mahayana Buddhism developed in Central Asia, in the country of Tibet, and they're mixed with Tibet's traditional religion and with Hinduism. In Tibet, the Buddhist leaders called lamas also led the government. When religious leaders head a government, that's called theocracy, which is one of your vocabulary words. The Dalai Lama was the Lama who headed the government, and the Panchen Lama was the Lama who led the religion. Both were considered reincarnations of the Buddha. Today, many Buddhists live in countries like Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, but few actually live in India, where Buddha was first preached. So take a second and watch the video. Only watch it till about 4:20 because I want you to focus on the 2 main sections of Buddhism, and thank you for listening.